You're overlooked for not being good enough at arson, insulted for expressing your emotions, and literally scarred for life by your own dad. Meanwhile, your stupid little sister is praised as a prodigy for her firebending abilities and Olympic-level gaslighting skills. This really sucks. But hold on, just 3 years later, you're the king of your entire nation, and your perfect little sister is locked away for committing war crimes against humanity. This is the story of Zuko and Azula, two royal siblings raised under the same roof, yet somehow ending up on opposite sides of sanity, morality, and global conflict. So how the hell did Zuko transition from daddy issues to Fire Lord, and Azula from prodigy to prisoner? And what psychological explanations can be given to explain their development? Let's explore how their minds work. Zuko's great-grandfather started this world war that's been going on for over 80 years by the time he's born. But that's okay, because Zuko's born rich as hell in the safety of the Fire Nation Palace to loving Mother Ursa and narcissistic, soon-to-be tyrannical dictator Ozai. Just 2 years later, his little sister Azula is born. From an early age, it's clear that Zuko is naturally kind and sensitive like his mother, which also means, to Zuko's father, that he's a complete loser. Azula, meanwhile, shows cruelty like her father, and would probably much rather spend her time torturing animals rather than petting them like a normal person. She also happens to be a firebending prodigy, and the only person who's ever been able to bend blue fire. So naturally, Zuko's wimpy personality and weak red fire are tossed to the side by his father in favor of Azula's harshness and never-before-seen skills. Zuko does continue training his firebending skills as a way of seeking validation from his father, but he's never quite able to live up to Azula's effortless talent. Because of this, Ozai openly grills him as weak and disappointing. This causes Zuko to develop an anxious attachment style towards his father through trauma, which later deepens and manifests itself differently throughout other relationships in Zuko's life. In contrast, Azula is rewarded with affection for her dominance and cruelty. But like Zuko, she learns that her father's love is conditional and must be earned through performance, which causes her to form a disorganized attachment style early in life. Due to his father's torment, Zuko internalizes a shame-based identity, a belief that he's inherently defective, which is unfortunately common in childhood trauma and abuse survivors. Zuko's strained relationship with his father drives him closer to his mother Ursa. Their bond is natural and genuine, and one of the few sources of warmth in Zuko's childhood, which says a lot considering he lives in a house full of firebenders. But despite Ursa's efforts, her connection with Azula is never strong, leaving her daughter distant, cold, and quietly resentful. Despite his mother's efforts to instill confidence, Zuko develops low self-esteem and emotional suppression, which later leads to anger dysregulation throughout his adolescence. His temper becomes the only emotion he feels safe expressing, because, to his father, rage is Zuko's only respectable quality. Azula's favoritism, meanwhile, creates conditional self-worth and plants the seeds of narcissistic defense, which is a psychological term used to explain an individual's need to mask insecurity and fear of rejection with perfection, control, and superiority. In Azula's case, she's not dumb. She sees her father's coldness towards Zuko, and despite her supremely confident exterior, has a deeply rooted fear that one day she'll be tossed aside by her father just like him. Now, Zuko and Azula's grandpa Azulon, who's the current tyrannical dictator of the Fire Nation and also a walking red flag, is getting pretty old. So Ozai starts plotting and scheming to steal the Fire Nation throne for himself. See, Ozai is actually second in line to become dictator after his older brother Iroh. And Iroh just so happens to be away from the capital right now and commanding troops in the war. So Ozai goes to Azulon, and he's all like, yo, big dog, let's say hypothetically you were to die like right now. You think you could give me the throne instead of Iroh, who's like totally supposed to be getting the throne next? And Azulon tweaks out on his son Ozai. He's like, yo, I may be as old as dirt, but there ain't no way I'm letting you get the throne instead of your brother Iroh, cause Iroh is like my firstborn son. And that's on tradition, man. And you know what? I can't even believe you asked me this dumb question. So to punish you, I'm gonna make you kill your firstborn son, Zuko. Cause somehow that makes sense, right? But if you want to do something that definitely makes sense, make sure to subscribe and drop a like on the video if you're enjoying the content. Anyways, despite the real pleasant family affair going on right now, Ozai's kind of chilling with the idea that he's just been ordered to kill Zuko. So he tells his wife Ursa that he's gonna kill their son, and she tweaks. Rightfully so, but she still tweaks. She's like, yo, you are not gonna kill my baby boy. I'll make a deal with you, Ozai. I'll help you kill your old daddy, and that way you can just kind of take your place as dictator, because your brother's like totally out of town right now and nobody will really care. And Ozai's like, alright. So Ursa helps Ozai poison current dictator Azulon, and Ozai's like, wow, would you look at that? My dad's dead. That really sucks. Alright, I'm gonna be dictator now, because my older brother Iroh, who's supposed to be dictator next, is totally out of town or something. And the whole Fire Nation's like, yeah, alright, that makes sense. So evil Ozai becomes dictator, and his first order of business is to banish his wife Ursa. So she packs up and leaves ASAP no Araki. So Zuko and Azula wake up, and they're all like, what, where did mom go? And Ozai's like, yeah, she went to go get some milk. She probably ain't coming back. Oh yeah, and by the way, I'm dictator now. Azula interprets her mother's disappearance as a form of rejection and betrayal, which only reinforce her already existing maternal mistrust and poor relationship with Ursa. Despite her confident exterior, Azula faces insecurities, and this incident only strengthens her need to maintain control over people. She subconsciously reasons that if she keeps control over others, they will be unable to hurt her emotionally. Her control is emotional armor, serving as a psychological defense mechanism against vulnerability. But all things considered, her mother's disappearance doesn't really affect Azula too much on the surface. But for Zuko, it's way different. Unlike Azula, who already receives high praise from her father, Zuko's mother was his emotional anchor and his only immediate family member to show him unconditional love early on. Zuko's attachment to his mother is an example of secure-based theory, which is a psychological concept in childhood development, where a caregiver provides emotional safety and stability. Losing his mother overnight, especially as he transitions to adolescence, shatters Zuko and only reinforces his deeply rooted belief that love is temporary and unreliable. This also leads to abandonment trauma, which serves alongside his anxious attachment style to influence relationships later on. A couple years later, Zuko goes to his first War Council meeting with Ozai and his top generals, and he's told that the Fire Nation's genius battle plans are to sacrifice an entire division of its soldiers just to lure out innocent Earth Kingdom forces, who are simply fighting back to defend themselves and their homeland. Now, despite promising beforehand not to speak at the War Council meeting, Zuko can't stand to hear that the Fire Nation's plan is to willingly sacrifice the lives of its soldiers. So he's like, yo guys, I don't care that I'm a kid, I'm gonna tell you how it is. This plan is messed up, and you can't do it. And Ozai goes nuts. He's like, it is totally mad presumptuous of you to tell me what to do, Zuko. So, as a punishment for speaking out at the War Council, Ozai forces Zuko to duel him in front of an audience. And Zuko's like, please don't hurt me, Dad. I'm really sorry. I didn't mean to insult your genocidal war plans. And Ozai's like, you got no honor. And I literally don't care that you're my son or that this is gonna hurt like the world's worst sunburn. I'm gonna burn half your face off and leave you permanently scarred. So Ozai burns half of Zuko's face off, and Zuko screams like a little girl in a horror movie. But at least it makes him irresistible to goth baddies for the rest of his life, so maybe Ozai was just really doing Zuko a favor here. Wait, what? He banishes Zuko from the Fire Nation too? What, scarring him for life wasn't enough of a punishment? Man, this Ozai cat is messed up. But in addition to scarring Zuko's face for life and banishing him from his home country, he's assigned an impossible mission to locate and capture the only threat to the Fire Nation's world domination, the mystical Avatar, who's not only been missing for almost 100 years, but is also universally known as the most powerful person in the world. But if Zuko somehow does manage to capture the Avatar, which Ozai knows that he won't, then he can finally come home with his honor restored. For Zuko, speaking out against the Fire Nation's battle plans, despite promising to stay silent, is an instinctive act of moral courage and a sign of strong, genuine leadership qualities. His conscience reacts faster than his ability to remember his promise to stay silent during the War Council meeting. When he hears the horrific plan to sacrifice loyal soldiers as bait, his empathy overrides everything else, and he can't help but speak up for what he knows is morally right. Unfortunately, suggesting against the morally corrupt plan leads to punishment. In burning half of his face, Zuko's father twists that instinctual empathy into feelings of guilt, teaching him that morality equals pain and suffering. For Zuko, this moment triggers learned helplessness, which is a psychological state where a person feels they are powerless to change their situation. Ozai burning Zuko's face also leads to additional complex trauma. This scar becomes a symbol of shame and rejection, deepening Zuko's already trauma-bonded loyalty to the very man who hurt him. When Zuko is banished and tasked with the impossible mission to find the Avatar, he clings to that quest for his father's approval, still trying to please him, while forever chasing an illusion of love. Now that Zuko's banished, Azula is next in line to become dictator of the Fire Nation. So Ozai wants to start getting her ready for some leadership positions. Okay, simple steps, not a bad idea. Now, you'd think maybe he'd use that dictator influence of his to make Azula captain of her school's cheerleading team or something. But nope! Ozai decides to make Azula a commander in the Fire Nation army at just 14 years old. And while most girls her age are worrying about homework in the middle school dance, Azula is learning how to command troops with the same cruel nature she showed as a child. And rather than correcting Azula's assertive ruthlessness and manipulative skills, Ozai praises her for it. For Azula, this early exposure to power reinforces already existing feelings of grandiosity, but she also uses that power as a coping mechanism to mask emotional emptiness. Beneath the confidence, her ego remains fragile and propped up only by controlling other soldiers and receiving external validation. Anyways, Zuko's banishment leads him away from Azula and the Fire Nation, meaning the two finally experience a developmental split, living away from one another for the first time. Zuko's sent away with a single worn-down ship, a minimal crew, and an important travel companion, his Uncle Iroh, who willingly joins Zuko on his mission to find the Avatar. Unlike Ozai, Uncle Iroh's personality is marked as patient and compassionate. His love is consistent, forgiving, and unconditional, which are traits Zuko lacked in his life since the disappearance of his mother. Iroh unquestionably serves as a sort of corrective parental figure for Zuko. His nurturing style slowly helps heal Zuko's wounded psyche and allows him to once again develop a secure attachment bond with a family member. Now, Zuko desperately searches for the Avatar for the next few years because he really just wants to go home, and everybody else thinks it's a lost cause, until one day when he sees this giant light coming out of the ground that looks like a freaking Minecraft beacon. So Zuko heads to a nearby water village where he finally finds the Avatar, who just so happens to be a 12-year-old kid and not a 100-year-old mystical warrior. And everybody in the water village is all like, "Whoa, you're the Avatar?" And the Avatar's like, "Yeah, I'm the Avatar. My name's Aang, and I still think poop jokes are funny because I'm 12 years old." And Zuko's like, "Yo, Avatar, you're coming with me because I gotta capture you." And Aang's like, "Alright, I'll come with you, but you gotta promise to leave these water village people alone." And Zuko's like, "Alright." So Zuko finally captures the Avatar and thinks he's gonna head home. But the Avatar escapes, and he and Zuko have an epic fight. Avatar Aang's like, "Air powers, go! Pew, 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 pew!" And Zuko's like, "Fireball! Boom, boom, boom!" And Zuko kind of gets destroyed, because the Avatar may be 12, but he is still the most powerful person on the planet. So he gets away, and Zuko's a little bummed out that the Avatar escapes, but he feels a rejuvenated sense of hope. Finally, after multiple years away from home, Zuko is the closest he's ever been to capturing the Avatar, and this failed encounter only motivates him to pursue the Avatar even harder than before. So Zuko quite literally follows the Avatar and his friends around the world like he's the paparazzi and they're the Kardashian crew. And Zuko tries over and over again to capture the Avatar. And he may just be the world's best stalker, but he's more like a puppy chasing cars when it comes to actually capturing Aang. As a matter of fact, he really is like a puppy chasing cars. Zuko spends so long trying and failing to capture and secure the Avatar that he really has no idea what he'd do if he actually succeeded. Sure, Zuko wants to take Aang back to the Fire Nation so that he can secure praise and redemption in his father's eyes. But for Zuko, There's no plan beyond capturing the Avatar. The variables of actually securing and transporting him to the Fire Nation, let alone the subsequent confrontation with his father and the life thereafter, are crucial elements that are completely set to the side. There are even multiple instances where Zuko does capture Aang again, but he never stops to think about what comes next, even putting himself into life-endangering scenarios just to keep the chase alive. The pursuit itself becomes Zuko's obsession and a core part of his identity, offering cruel structure in the form of repeated failure to a life that's already been defined by chaos. Meanwhile, word gets back to Ozai that the Avatar has been spotted, and he's like, whoa, I didn't even think the Avatar was actually still alive. I sort of just sent Zuko on a mission to capture him, because I knew we'd never be able to do it. So now, I'm gonna send Azula to capture the Avatar, because unlike Zuko, she's actually not a disappointment. So Ozai sends Azula to capture the Avatar, and also tells her to bring home Zuko and Iroh while she's at it, because Ozai's mad at them for undermining some of his war interests. Azula takes along some of her childhood friends on her mission to find Zuko and the Avatar, but as usual, is controlling and manipulative towards them to avoid her own feelings of powerlessness and inadequacy while on her pursuit. While Azula is a very capable firebender and tactician in her own right, she is still just a teenager. And realistically, Ozai would be better off sending out some of his top military generals to capture the Avatar, rather than his 14-year-old daughter. Believing the Avatar to be dead, he sends Zuko to capture him as a way of torture. But his decision to send Azula to capture the Avatar now that he's confirmed to be alive serves as an example of his narcissistic parenting style and conditional love. Ozai doesn't send Azula on her mission because she's strategically the best choice. He sends her because her wins validate his own ego. Like other parents with narcissistic personality disorder, Ozai sees his children as extensions of himself rather than as individuals. Ozai hopes that Azula, his golden child, will be the one to capture Aang and Zuko so that he himself will experience feelings of pride and power. When Azula takes on the mission to find the Avatar, it represents a role reversal and makes Zuko even more desperate to find Aang himself, as he still feels that if he's the one to capture and secure the Avatar, that he'll receive praise in his father's eyes and be welcomed home a hero. This dynamic where the two siblings both search for the Avatar creates a trauma loop, as they're both chasing their father's approval, but from opposite sides of the same coin. Unfortunately for Zuko's ambitions to find the Avatar, he and his uncle Iroh are forced to lay low for a bit when they learn that Azula is hunting them down. So they choose to go to the Earth Kingdom capital city of Ba Sing Se and blend in with the Earth Kingdom commoners to hide their identity. Zuko ditches the royal Fire Nation attire he's proudly worn his whole life, instead going with some worn-out peasant clothes. And while the goal of these actions are to hide from Azula, they actually serve to teach an important psychological lesson. The humbling clothes and low-key lifestyle are a sharp contrast from his palace upbringings. Deprived of status amongst Earth Kingdom commoners, Zuko works an honest job at a tea shop, defends villagers from aggressive Fire Nation soldiers, and even sets Appa free from imprisonment, despite him being one of the Avatar's travel companions. While Zuko can easily leverage Appa's captivity to bait the Avatar, he chooses to free him, demonstrating a critical moment of moral integrity. Here, Zuko learns intrinsic value apart from external approval, choosing to act on his inherent empathy rather than self-interest, which is an essential part of his identity reconstruction. In Ba Sing Se, Zuko experiences what it's like to live without war, power, or status, and for the first time, makes strides towards building an identity separate from his father's validation. Like Zuko, Azula also goes undercover as she navigates through enemy Earth Kingdom territory. But instead of dressing as a peasant like Zuko, she disguises herself in noble warrior clothing, which demonstrates that, while even in disguise, Azula can't help but present herself as someone with status and power, which speaks to her projected self-image and narcissistic tendencies. Anyways, the Avatar and his friends just so happen to be in the Earth Kingdom city of Ba Sing Se, while Zuko and Iroh continue hiding from Azula there. Azula realizes the Avatar is in the city, so she heads there, and while her initial goal is to capture him, she ambitiously sets her sights to something even larger. Using her manipulative skills, she takes down the entire city's political forces from within and secures the enemy territory for the Fire Nation. And in taking Ba Sing Se, she basically single-handedly does within weeks what the Fire Nation had failed to do over the past 100 years. The Avatar realizes Azula's taken over Ba Sing Se, and he's like, whoa, Azula, you totally can't do that, yo. And Azula's like, oh yeah? Let's fight. So they fight, and it goes down crazy. Aang's like, pew, 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 and Azula's like, boom, boom, fire powers, lightning bolts, zap, zap. And while they're fighting, Iroh and Zuko show up to the party like, what up, y'all? And Iroh plans to help the Avatar fight against Azula. And Azula's like, oh my gosh, this is great. I could go home to Daddy Ozai and tell him I captured Zuko and Iroh, the Avatar, and Ba Sing Se? Yeah, I'm gonna cash out on this one, alright? And Zuko's like, I'm gonna help defeat you. And Azula's like, yeah? Okay, Zuko. If you betray Iroh right now and help me defeat the Avatar and his friends, I'll give you some of the credit, and Dad will finally love you. And this shocks Zuko. So now he's at a crossroads. Does he go against his sister and give up any remaining hope of returning home a hero? Or does he betray Iroh, the person who's mentored and loved him unconditionally since the start of his journey, to finally earn his father's approval? He thinks about what he's learned from Iroh and his efforts towards establishing his own identity outside of an endless search for the Avatar. But for Zuko, the desperate craving for his father's love and the guarantee that he'll finally receive it overwhelms everything else. So he betrays Iroh, joins Azula, and helps her defeat the Avatar. Now, Zuko and Azula thinks that one of her lightning bolts might have killed the Avatar. But unfortunately for them, the Avatar's friends help him escape wounded, but alive, and without being captured. Despite being significantly more powerful than the two, Iroh refuses to hurt Zuko and Azula. So they take him, now a deeply saddened man betrayed by the nephew he showed unconditional love, back to the Fire Nation to be held prisoner for attempting to help the Avatar. Now, there's actually a lot to unpack here from a psychological perspective. For Azula, taking over Ba Sing Se is a power move rooted in overachievement. Despite her mission being to capture Zuko, Iroh, and the Avatar, she realizes that she can do more, and in doing so, will earn additional love and praise from her father that she continuously strives for. This level of overachievement is an example of narcissistic triumph, which is a psychological defense mechanism she uses to continue to mask her deep insecurities. By telling Zuko she'll redeem him in their father's eyes, Azula weaponizes family dynamics to reassert control. For Zuko, agreeing to betray Iroh is an example of a trauma-bonded relapse, which is essentially a repetition of familiar behavior patterns stemming from his childhood need for his father's conditional love. In this moment, Zuko regresses all growth with Iroh under stress, and trades his progress towards establishing himself as an individual with a purpose outside of the pursuit of his father's conditional love, for what he sees as a golden ticket to finally gain that affection. So, Zuko and Azula head home to the Fire Nation, and Zuko's given praise from his father because Azula tells him that Zuko killed the Avatar. He's welcomed home as a hero with restored honor and his rightful royal position, and he even starts dating a girl during this time. But despite finally getting what he thought he wanted in his father's praise and restored honor, Zuko feels emptier than ever, reflecting on his betrayal of Iroh and his journey across the world where he saw firsthand the immense damage and suffering caused by the Fire Nation. Zuko begins to question his loyalty to Ozai and the corrupt colonial-rooted ideas that had been so hammered into his mind over his formative years. He experiences cognitive dissonance, which is a psychological term used to describe the intense discomfort an individual experiences from holding two contradictory beliefs. He grapples with the very concept of external success, or validation through Ozai's conditional love, and his own internal values. This introspective period triggers rapid individuation, which is the psychological process where a person develops into their own through self-realization and by moving beyond societal pressure and parental influences. Now, because Zuko's still sulking around as depressed as Squidward, he decides to visit good old Uncle Iroh in prison for some clarity. Zuko's like, yo Iroh, I know I may have betrayed you at our last family reunion, but I totally want to talk to you now. And Iroh remains as silent as the spirit library in season 2. So Zuko starts getting pissed and defending his actions, but eventually gives up and walks away defeated. He starts to become paranoid upon hearing rumors that the Avatar is still alive, which only puts him further on edge. And when Zuko eventually confirms that Aang is still alive, despite him and Azula telling their father that the Avatar is dead, it breaks him. Visiting Iroh in prison and failing to receive his forgiveness causes Zuko to become even more depressed and introspective than ever. Reflecting on his betrayal of Iroh and his wrongdoings over the years only serves to deepen his guilt and feelings of remorse. Iroh's lack of forgiveness forces Zuko to confront his actions rather than deflect them. and his uncle's silence triggers Zuko's anxious attachment style and abandonment trauma, which resurface childhood wounds from his father's conditional love and his mother's sudden disappearance, respectively. When Zuko receives word that the Avatar is still alive, it completely shatters the illusion that his father's approval was ever real at all, as Ozai only showed love and praise under the belief that Zuko killed the Avatar. With that illusion gone, Zuko finally realizes that his father's love was never love at all, and just control disguised as affection. Deciding by himself to make a change for the greater good, Zuko confronts Ozai and tells him that not only is he defecting from the Fire Nation, but that his plans are to join the Avatar and help him and his friends defeat the evil Fire Nation and finally end the 100-Year War. Ozai calls Zuko a coward and a disappointment once again, and even throws out a final manipulative cheap shot by telling Zuko a twisted narrative about his mother. But this time, Zuko isn't crushed by his father's abusive words or attempts to torment him. He takes them in stride and leaves the Fire Nation, making the terrifying choice to stand alone rather than continue the cycle of abuse. Opposing his father directly is the culmination of Zuko's period of individuation and serves as a time of post-traumatic growth, which is when an individual transforms pain into purpose. In leaving the Fire Nation, this time willingly, Zuko steps into the unknown with a renewed goal and feelings of hope for his future. So Zuko goes and finds Team Avatar and hits them with his best YouTube intro. He's all like, "Hey guys, Zuko here. I know I may have just stalked you around the entire world and stuff and tried to capture you for 3 years, but I'm good now and we should totally be friends and hit up the beach or something." And Aang and his friends are obviously like, no, we don't trust you like that, Zuko. But they forget about that a few days later and eventually let Zuko join their group. Zuko's initial rejection from Team Avatar brings out his anxious attachment style again. Their lack of acceptance, while admittedly justified, makes Zuko feel like a failure once more, causing him to spiral and insult himself repeatedly due to a lifetime of tying his self-worth to the approval of others. Anyways, despite Azula's fire being blue and hotter than any other firebenders, she ain't looking too hot mentally right now either. Sure, she's more respected than ever by her father for leading the mission to secure Ba Sing Se, but confirmation that the Avatar is still alive following their fight is a wound to her ego and an example of narcissistic injury, which is a psychological term used to describe emotional trauma that damages a person's sense of self-worth and pride. Narcissistic injury is often triggered by criticism, judgment, or, in Azula's case, perceived threats to her inflated self-image. Even though she did succeed in capturing Iroh and the city of Ba Sing Se, despite her best efforts, she's unable to kill the Avatar. The lone hiccup in an otherwise overwhelmingly successful mission causes Azula to see herself and the mission as a colossal failure. Her mental state only gets more unstable when Zuko leaves the Fire Nation, as his desertion once again reinforces feelings of failure. Remember, part of Azula's mission when she's sent to capture the Avatar is also to bring home Zuko and Iroh. And now that Zuko is gone, she's lost another one of her accomplishments from the mission that was once considered to be her crowning glory of power and appraisal. So, Azula and her friends head off to the Fire Nation equivalent of Alcatraz prison that Zuko just so happens to be at in an attempt to break out an ally of Team Avatar. While Zuko's prison break-in is noble, Azula sees Zuko and becomes hell-bent on revenge against him for his treason. Azula's objective here is to capture Zuko and right what she sees as a major failure. And in doing so, she hopes to again receive conditional love and praise from her father. Unfortunately for Azula, her lifelong best friends betray her, attacking her to help Zuko and his friends escape. They realize Azula's actions are wrong and are done being manipulated and tormented by her. Their betrayal shocks Azula, causing her additional feelings of failure, as she has now failed her new mission in recapturing Zuko. Her fragile ego collapses under attachment rupture, which is a psychological term used to describe a severing of an emotional bond between two people. Azula had previously seen her friends as servants to do her bidding, and losing this control over them leads to a loss of self, including what's called paranoid decompensation, or a psychological breakdown fueled by perfectionism, fear of abandonment, and emotional repression. Here now, Zuko and Azula, two siblings raised in the same home, are once again headed in opposite directions, with Zuko gearing towards authenticity and righteousness, and Azula towards self-destruction. Team Avatar starts planning out how they're gonna take down the Fire Lord, and Zuko helps Aang and some of his friends, not only in missions in an effort to end the war, but also in their own journeys of self-actualization, which is a process of an individual realizing their full potential and achieving personal growth. For Zuko, helping others directly allows him to get closer to his own self-actualization. In escorting his friends on their own journeys, he learns how to use his pain to help others heal, and finally begins to develop spots of secure attachment in other relationships in his life. Anyways, it's finally time for Avatar Aang to beat the hell out of Fire Lord Ozai and restore peace to the world. But for Zuko, it's a day filled with intense anxiety that relates back to his anxious attachment style. Not because his father is about to get beat up like a punching bag by a 12-year-old, but because it also means he'll be reuniting with his uncle Iroh, the man who had nurtured him so much during his years of banishment, who at this point has broken out of Fire Nation prison like it was just an escape room. Zuko's still extremely guilty about betraying Iroh, and building up the courage to confront him again is a huge task. Zuko's slightly healed, albeit still deeply rooted anxious attachment, makes him assume that Iroh will never speak with him again. Despite this, and to Zuko's shock, Iroh embraces him while crying hysterically. Zuko asks Iroh how he can forgive him so easily, to which Iroh responds that he was never mad at all, just extremely sad that Zuko had lost his way, but now is even more proud of him than ever before because he found his way again, this time on his own accord. Meanwhile, Ozai knows the Avatar is coming for him, but he just so happens to be ready to unleash his master plan. Ozai's gonna use the power of some comet to help him take over and become dictator of the entire world. And because you can't just be dictator of the world and dictator of the Fire Nation, he decides he needs a vice president. Or like a vice dictator or something. Anyways, he chooses Azula, whose accomplishments he still lives vicariously through, and is someone he obviously knows is cruel enough to keep everybody in line. So Zuko and another member of Team Avatar, Katara, head over to the Fire Nation to stop Azula from becoming Fire Lord, while Aang scoots on over to the Earth Kingdom to take out Ozai. Now, Azula's getting ready for her big coronation, but gone are the calculated manipulative tools in her arsenal of control. On this very important day, her actions are impulsive and emotionally driven. She fires longtime Fire Nation loyalists and servants, and is haunted by hallucinations of her mother. In these hallucinations, Azula's mother tells her that she's confused, and that all her life she has used fear to control people. To which Azula retaliates, telling the vision of her mother that she has no choice but to use fear to control people, and that trusting others is foolish. Here, Azula's psyche implodes under accumulated stress, and without the external validation of others, her fragile sense of self shatters, while the hallucination of her mother represents Azula's subconscious, trying to reconcile with attachment rupture due to the unresolved childhood attachment trauma linked to her mother. So, Azula's about to be crowned Fire Lord, but suddenly, Zuko and Katara step in, and Zuko's all like, "Yo, Azula, you can't be Fire Lord because you're evil. Iroh said I gotta be Fire Lord because I'm not evil." And Azula's all like, "Zuko, you like a little boy to me. You really want to become Fire Lord? You gonna have to duel me for it." And Zuko's like, "Bet." And Katara's like, "What do you mean, bet? Azula is totally manipulating you, and you are not gonna win this duel, bro. Cause like, no offense, but Azula's totally more powerful than you." And Zuko's like, "Nah, bro, she's totally not as powerful as she was, cause she's crazy right now and out of touch with her feelings and stuff. I could totally take her." And Katara's like, "Alright." So Zuko and Azula have this crazy firefight. They're both throwing around fireballs like boom, 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 pew, 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 pew. And there's fireballs flying around everywhere like it's a game of hot potato. And Zuko's surprisingly winning this thing, even though Azula is like totally a better firebender than he is. Even her powerful raw skill isn't enough to match Zuko's composure. In fact, Zuko's winning so hard that he gets a little cocky and starts taunting Azula. He's like, "What's up, Azula? You ain't gonna throw any of your special lightning powers at me today?" And she's like, "You want lightning? Alright, I'll give you lightning." And Zuko's super ready for Azula's lightning powers. But instead, she throws it at Katara. Zuko sees a lightning bolt bigger than you ever seen on the Discovery Channel, heading straight for Katara's face, and he's like, "No." And in an act of courage, he jumps in between Katara and the lightning, taking it on full force and sacrificing himself in an act of courage. Now Zuko's badly injured, so Katara steps in and takes on Azula herself. Azula's going crazy now, throwing lightning all over the place like zap, zap, zap! But Katara uses Azula's crazed and impulsive state to her advantage, outmaneuvering and defeating her. She runs over to Zuko and she's like, "Are you good, bro?" And he's like, "It feels like I just got electrocuted by like 1,000 Pikachus, but he's on a Cartoon Network show, so I'm good." While Azula opts for a cheap shot, and therefore technically does defeat Zuko before being taken out by Katara, Zuko otherwise would have easily won the duel. Despite Azula's far superior firebending skills, she's completely off her game emotionally. And Zuko, in contrast, is much more in touch with his emotions than ever before. Before his misstep in taunting Azula, he's calm and composed, demonstrating excellent emotional regulation, as opposed to Azula's emotional dysregulation. In fact, from a character perspective, Azula's blue fire is one of the most interesting deliberate pieces of character design in the entire series, as it is proven to be hotter and stronger than the red fire of other benders, but because of that, like Azula herself, it's also more unstable under emotional strain. And when Azula starts losing control during her duel with Zuko, her firebending loses its precision. In taking the full force of Azula's lightning to shield Katara, who was once his enemy, Zuko demonstrates a full circle moment of empathy and maturity, and shows just how much his attachment style has grown since joining Team Avatar. Zuko's once anxious attachment style continues the transition towards secure attachment as he risks himself, not for approval, but out of genuine care for Katara. Azula's crying hysterically as she's restrained, while Avatar Aang subsequently beats up Ozai like a piñata at a little kid's birthday party. He's defeated, and the war is won, which means Zuko becomes the new Fire Lord, and Azula ends up in a mental institute. As Zuko leads with humility and seeks reconciliation for the Fire Nation's wrongdoings, he finally reaches his own self-actualization. His values of virtue and moral clarity are not inherited, but learned. As someone who's born empathetic before being broken by trauma and once again restored to his empathy through healthy attachment and choice, Zuko embodies the synthesis of nature and nurture. His arc is a case of nurture overpowering nature as he heals early trauma through corrective attachment and introspection. On the contrary, Azula's arc is one of nature corrupted by nurture. Her natural skill and dominance become maladaptive under pressure of conditional love and isolation. Together, Zuko and Azula illustrate that development is neither fixed by genetics nor destiny. It's interpersonal, environmental, and profoundly human. So, how would a psychologist diagnose Zuko? Well, his transformation from banished prince to Fire Lord points to something a bit deeper than just going through puberty. His feelings of neglect, along with repeated abuse from his father, leads Zuko to experience low self-worth, irritability, and difficulty regulating his emotions, which makes a diagnosis of complex PTSD seem obvious. He also experiences emotional exhaustion and a loss of direction, but it's probably more accurate to view these symptoms as extensions of his complex PTSD rather than as a basis for a depressive disorder diagnosis. Zuko's difficulty regulating his emotions, alongside an anxious attachment style, isolation, and struggles to form and maintain secure relationships, reflect persistent attachment trauma, though he likely doesn't fit enough of the criteria required for a diagnosable attachment disorder. So now, how would a psychologist diagnose Azula? Her grandiose sense of self, manipulative behavior, and constant need for control and admiration make Azula a strong candidate for narcissistic personality disorder. Her deep fear of abandonment, unstable relationships, emotional volatility, identity disturbance, and episodes of paranoia, compounded with early childhood trauma and a disorganized attachment style, make a diagnosis of borderline personality disorder another likely possibility. But it doesn't stop there. She displays psychopathic traits, including aggressiveness, a willingness to harm others without remorse, and a striking lack of empathy, which gives her behaviors often associated with antisocial personality disorder. But Azula's cruelty is often tied to validation and a fear of rejection, rather than an intrinsic lack of conscience, commonly associated with individuals with antisocial personality disorder. Azula's obsession with her self-image and constant need for control over others in her life point to OCD tendencies, but she doesn't quite fit the compulsive end of the criteria required for a full diagnosis. So what do you think? How would you diagnose Zuko and Azula? Let me know, and tell me if you'd like to see an Avatar Aang analysis next in the comments below. Thanks for watching.